In the silence before time began, before the stars found their place and the oceans kissed the shores, there was God eternal, unchanging, and full of glory. With a single word, he called light out of the darkness, and the universe awakened to the sound of his voice. He stretched out the heavens like a curtain and set the sun to rule the day and the moon to govern the night. The stars, countless and bright, were scattered across the sky as a testimony of his power. The waters gathered into seas, the dry ground appeared, and from the earth sprouted grass, trees, and fruit, each bearing seed after its kind, filling the world with beauty and life. Then God filled the seas with great creatures and tiny fish, each swimming according to its kind. The skies fluttered with birds of every color and song, and the land came alive with beasts mighty and strong, others small and gentle. Each living thing moved in harmony, perfectly ordered by the wisdom of the Creator. And God looked upon it all and said, "It is good." But God was not finished. From the dust of the ground, he formed man with his own hands, shaping him with care and love. Then he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Unlike the beasts of the field or the birds of the air, this creation bore the very image of God, made to walk with him, to know him, and to reflect his glory upon the earth. God placed a man in a garden called Eden, a paradise filled with every tree that was pleasant to the sight and good for food. Rivers flowed through it, bringing life and beauty. And in the midst of the garden stood two trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. To Adam, God gave both a home and a purpose, to tend and keep the garden, and above all, to walk in obedience and fellowship with him. Seeing that it was not good for man to be alone, God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. From his side, he took a rib and skillfully fashioned it into a woman. When Adam awoke, he beheld her and rejoiced, saying, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Asterisk together they stood as one, united by God's design, equal in worth and purpose, and clothed in innocence without shame. Day after day, Adam and Eve walked in the cool of the garden, hearing the voice of their Creator and delighting in his presence. Peace reigned, and every living thing lived in harmony under God's perfect order. There was no pain, no fear, no death, only the joy of life as it was meant to be, a reflection of heaven upon the earth. But in the midst of this beauty, the serpent, cunning and deceitful, watched with envy. He longed to twist what God had made good and to draw man's heart away from trust in the Creator. One day, he approached Eve with subtle words, planting doubt in her mind. Asterisk, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Asterisk, with lies disguised as wisdom. He began the work of temptation. Eve looked upon the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the fruit appeared pleasant to the eyes and desirable to make one wise. The serpent's words echoed in her heart, and slowly her hand reached out. She took the fruit, tasted it, and gave some to Adam, who was with her. He too ate, and in that moment their eyes were opened, but not to glory. Instead, shame and fear flooded their hearts, and innocence was lost. At once they realized their nakedness, and they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. When they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, they hid among the trees, trembling in fear. The voice of God called out, Asterisk, Adam, where are you? Asterisk, a man who once walked boldly with his Creator, now answered with shame, confessing his fear and brokenness. God, with sorrow in his voice, asked what they had done. Adam blamed the woman, and the woman blamed the serpent. Yet neither could escape the weight of their choice. Judgment was spoken. The serpent would crawl on his belly in the dust. The woman would know pain in childbirth, and the man would toil by the sweat of his brow. And worst of all, death had entered, a separation from the God of life. Yet even in judgment, God's mercy shone. He clothed Adam and Eve with garments of skin, covering their shame, and spoke of a future hope, that the seed of the woman would one day crush the serpent's head, though his heel would be bruised. With heavy hearts, he sent them out of Eden, away from the tree of life, but not without the promise that redemption would come in the fullness of time. Outside the garden, life was no longer easy. The ground bore thorns and thistles, and survival demanded sweat and struggle. Adam and Eve raised their children in a world marked by sin's shadow. Cain and Abel, their sons, brought offerings to the Lord, Abel from the firstborn of his flock, and Cain from the fruits of the soil. But when God looked with favor on Abel's gift and not on Cain's, jealousy burned within Cain's heart until it drove him to commit the first murder, rising against his brother in the field. The ground drank Abel's blood, and heaven bore witness to the cry of injustice. God confronted Cain, asking, but Cain replied with defiance, and he was sent away as a restless wanderer. Yet even then, God marked him with a sign of protection, showing that his mercy still lingered, even for one who had spilled innocent blood. As generations passed, the earth became filled with violence and corruption. The thoughts of men's hearts were only evil continually, and grief filled the heart of God. But in the midst of the darkness, one man found grace, Noah, who walked with God when the world had turned away. To him, God revealed his plan to cleanse the earth with a great flood, yet preserve a remnant through an ark of safety built by obedience and faith. Noah obeyed, building the ark though the world mocked him. He gathered his family in pairs of every creature, just as God had commanded. When the appointed day came, the skies broke open and the fountains of the deep were unleashed. Rain fell without ceasing, and the waters rose higher and higher until mountains disappeared beneath the flood. All flesh perished, but within the ark there was refuge, for God had shut the door and kept his promised protection. For 40 days and nights the rains poured, and the earth groaned under the weight of judgment. Yet at last the storm ceased, and the ark floated upon a world washed clean. After many months, the waters began to recede, and Noah released a dove, which returned with freshly plucked olive leaf, a sign of new beginnings. When the earth was dry again, Noah and his family stepped out, and the first thing he did was build an altar to the Lord, offering a sacrifice of gratitude. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and made a covenant with Noah, declaring that never again would he destroy all life with a flood. As a sign of this everlasting promise, he set a rainbow in the clouds, a bow of beauty stretched across the sky, reminding every generation of his mercy. From that day forward, each storm carried not only clouds and rain, but also the colors of hope shining in the heavens. From Noah, sons and nations of the earth began to spread, filling valleys, plains, and mountains. Yet mankind's pride soon rose again, for they sought to build a city with a tower reaching the heavens, that they might make a name for themselves and never be scattered. But the Lord came down, confused their language, and scattered them across the face of the earth. The Tower of Babel stood as a reminder of man's arrogance and God's power to humble. Subscribe for the next part. God bless you.